Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, an Italy travel podcast, soon to be the Italy Travel Podcast. I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
And today we are back with headline episodes. We are doing the kitchen sink, if you will, of headline episodes. But before we get started, I just want to say if you want to know anything else about our upcoming name change that should be not finalized, it's already final, but it will be permanent in about 4 weeks, I think. Then you can check out the episode that dropped on Wednesday that has all the information you might need. I also want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has been following us, leaving reviews, commenting, reaching out. We really do appreciate it. If you would also like to, you can do so on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Likewise, if you want to check out our website, onlyabag.com, it is chock full of articles. At least I think so, but it's got articles on there, and
I agree.
We are unbiased. And if you want to check them out, if you want to save them for your trip, those are mostly to answer questions. Some of them are informative, and some of them are just more those save them on your phone somewhere. So that way, if you're ever missing a train or you want to know the difference between two train companies, you have it on an easy to reach place. You can also reach out to us there or on our Instagram at Only a Bag Podcast, which will probably be changing too when we change the name of the podcast itself. And you can reach out and have any questions or comments or concerns, and we'll be happy to answer them. Last but not least, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so using the affiliate links in the description of this episode or any other episode or on our website. We receive a small commission from anything you book, whether it's a hotel or a flight or a hotel room stay. I already said that. I did. Whether it's a tour. There we go. That was the third one. But at no additional cost to you. We just get a cut from the aggregates website, and we are not representatives of that website. We are merely affiliates of that website. You can also send us a direct donation on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/onlyabag. Thank you all again so much for your support. We deeply appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And today, well, we're going to talk about headlines in Italy, as we do. And we do what I think we want to mention first, just because it would feel almost callous to not talk about the recent bombing of Iran and then the subsequent bombing of everything around Iran, by Iran, and then the sort of emerging energy crisis and the sort of loss of hundreds of innocent civilians' lives. So it feels strange not to talk about that, or at least acknowledge it, to let y'all know that we are not unaware.
Right, exactly.
And Italy, if we may speak for an entire country, is most certainly not unaware. It is just simply we try to only talk about things on the podcast that are either pertinent, if it's going to be incredibly sad, these that are at least pertinent and important to your trip or anybody's life living in Italy, or again, things that just have to do with Italy. And it feels a little bit like, again, we don't want to be yet another place that you are happening to, if you were trying to sort of just
have a moment not thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Compartmentalize your life slightly. Just, keep the fear of an impending World War III just off to the side.
Yeah. I mean, we know that there are ongoing tragedies around the world, and we purposefully don't bring up things unless we have to. Like today we're going to talk about gas prices in Italy.
Which honestly seems like a trivial thing.
And is directly related to the ongoing war in Iran. So we didn't want to not mention that.
Exactly. Which, again, and we also wanted to mention specifically, say that while we are talking about gas prices,
right,
that is obviously not the biggest tragedy here at all.
Absolutely.
So with that said, I guess let's talk about gas prices. And it probably won't affect you all too much. I say that now what are we talking about? Are we recording this on March 24th of 2026?
Yes.
But it might. Darcy has some figures pulled up. She looks ready to share.
I am not quite. Oh, I'm ready now. I had to scroll through the notes. So obviously a lot of our listeners are in the US and are balking at prices of gas, as you would. But I had to put this in perspective for myself. So gas is sold by the liter here in Italy. So often you'll see, like 174 a liter.
160 something.
160 something, exactly. It is now at something like 199 euros a liter, which translates to $9.58 per gallon here in Italy on average right now.
That is, insane. And I think if you were renting a car, well, actually, if I may, kind of running down what this means for you. One, if you're renting a car We typically recommend renting a smaller car anyway, mainly because it does not limit your ability to get out into the countryside or
More
drive
navigable.
more navigable. You can park easier with it. It's just, even in Rome, where some of the streets are larger, there are still a lot of small streets. Keep in mind too, I said Rome, but if you are driving in Rome, the entire historic district of Rome is now a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit hard cap. It is not varying anymore. It's not, oh, but it's just a hard 30 kilometers an hour everywhere in the historic district of Rome. That's not a headline. I'm just letting y'all know in case you are renting a car. This also means that there will probably be an increase in jet fuel prices, which means that flights will be more expensive. Something to be aware of if you are, mostly I think for those who are European and British listeners, those from the Great British Isles. I don't
From
know
the
what.
UK?
There we go. Thank you. I'm like, what is that area called? And Ireland.
Yes.
And no, it's just simply that if you are flying with something like EasyJet, Ryanair, I think Vueling is another low-cost carrier.
I think so.
Wizz Air, they often operate on these really tight margins, but that includes having fuel at a very cheap price. And if it has, I think some jet fuel providers have doubled or tripled their prices recently, which means that some of these companies are looking at, well, insolvency. Not necessarily, but I think even Norwegian is no longer a low-cost carrier. They sort of disappeared during COVID, but that type of thing where low-cost carriers disappear because they sort of operate on this thinnest possible margins, including sort of fuel. And while they can increase the prices respectfully, no one will fly Ryanair if it's more expensive than 14 cents I found on my couch cushions.
Right.
It is a horrible airline to fly, including EasyJet and Wizz Air and all these other ones. But it is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And if you're whatever, the same, flight is being done by somebody else at the same cost, and it actually gives you leg room and a sense of human decency, people are probably going to choose those.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mentioned that just at the top. Those are probably the biggest things you'll run into. Like I said, more expensive flight as well as more expensive fuel on the ground. We are going into summer, so this is less of an issue. But I know that also the LPG, which is a liquid petroleum gas, the reserves and the I guess the storage and all the infrastructure around that in Qatar, if I'm pronouncing it right. I always pronounce it Qatar.
I don't
but
know if it's Qatar, Qatar, or
somebody
something
else-
completely different.
Honestly, watch
We
it be something
apologize for
different.
not saying it correctly.
Somebody said Qatar once, and they sounded like they knew more than me, so I'm just going to say Qatar.
Okay.
I usually do that. I'm like, you sound knowledgeable, and you pronounced it that way. I'm going to start doing that.
Sure.
And I know that they recently closed down, I think, helium, which shouldn't affect anybody except, I guess, it will affect people for sure, but not most of us. And I think their liquid petroleum gas, they also shut down some major site of, I think, transporting it or in the infrastructure around it, which just means I know that Italy does import as well, mainly because some gases use liquid petroleum gas. Some houses use it for heating, I believe. So while we're going to the summer and heating will be less important, thankfully, it will certainly lead to a rise in energy costs, which just means hotels will more than likely be more expensive. That's probably the big one, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, but just mostly hotels, Airbnbs, obviously, but anything where you might be using air conditioning is what I'm thinking of.
I would say also if you're getting a tour that involves a car or a boat or anything like that, there might be a small increase in price. I haven't seen that yet as I'm planning a trip for later in the spring, but I would imagine there might be a small effect on that.
Yes. Yeah. So that is just something to, I guess, keep in mind, as you plan your trip to Italy. And moving on, not slightly, I was going to say slightly, but to literally now the rest of the headlines. As an update to a previous headline, I think from February, we mentioned that the Teatro Sannazaro, or the Sannazaro Theater in Naples, had caught fire and most of it burned down, the iconic dome, as well as most of the furnishings inside the interior. And we talked about how this was such an important part of the sort of Naples life, as well as just an important, historical location. It has, and that people wanted to restore it, essentially. It has now, it looks like there's a plan by Italy, the state of Italy, to purchase the Teatro Sannazaro in Naples, and then obviously repair it and fix it. So essentially they're stepping in to basically say, yeah, I don't know if you guys can privately raise enough money, so we'll go ahead and use government funds and then make it a state-run thing, which should be good. It looks like there's no pushback to it.
Okay.
So I don't think it's, I don't get the sense that anyone's saying like, oh, this needs to remain in, if it's
Private hands.
Exactly. It
Okay.
seems to be more like people are excited, because also then it could mean things that like they're set on certain prices and they can't, extravagantly raise the prices. And it looks like we talked about there were performers and shows happening. It looks like they are all being moved to the Palazzo Reale in the interim. So if you are in Naples and you wanted to catch a show at the Teatro Sannazaro and now you can't, it should now be at the Palazzo Reale. Also, I guess sticking very briefly with Naples, the area, this is just not majorly important, but it seems weird not to mention the Hepatitis A outbreak.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
It seems like, so if you are going to Naples anytime soon, like this week, next week, something to be aware of is new restrictions, specifically around raw shellfish in Ischia and in Naples.
Okay.
I don't know if Capri is going to include it. I don't know if like Sorrento and that whole area. But in Naples, it is a long customary street food to have raw shellfish, kind of like in Savannah with the oysters. So you just sort of just a shot of oyster in your mouth. It's kind of the same thing, but I think with other shellfish, it has there's been some sort of contamination, and they're not sure. It's like kind of all hands on deck right now. So they're trying to figure out, is it at a processing plant? Is it in the water? Is it somebody dumped something? Because apparently, obviously, these are mollusks that filter out the water, so in the ocean, the sea. So they're wondering if people dumped something or something like that, if it's a contamination at the site where they're being harvested from, or if at some sort of later place, if it's somehow people are getting sick from some cross-contamination. However, what this means for you all visiting is that raw shellfish, the sale of raw shellfish for immediate consumption, is now banned right now in Naples and Ischia.
Okay.
You can go to a fishmonger and buy raw shellfish without a problem. You can go to a grocery store and buy raw shellfish without a problem. They don't care what you're doing at your house. Not really. They're asking you not to eat raw shellfish.
So you need to cook it, is the thing.
They're just saying, please cook it. Please
Okay.
do like something with the vongole in a pot. You cook the clams. Don't eat them raw.
I didn't know that would get rid of what would spread the hepatitis A.
I hope so. I hope they're not just saying that.
I'm sure that they would tell people not to eat them full stop if it couldn't be prevented by cooking them.
Yeah. I hope so. I think so. This also means that there are right now 84 cases in Naples and 154 in the region, mostly around Naples. It also means the Cotugno Hospital, which is the major infectious disease hospital in the south, is right now overrun, I guess. They have 120 beds basically, and there are now 154 confirmed cases.
Wow.
So they're saying like,
That's a lot of cases.
yeah, and especially the hospital, 120 beds does not seem that big, but I realized like, oh yeah, for major infectious diseases, you're probably thinking like, yeah, that's what would you need more of? But I don't know. Again, this is like a CDC kind of hospital, like in the States, in Atlanta type thing.
Oh, okay.
But, and I think especially at the beginning where they weren't sure what it was, it's just people getting sick, obviously very quickly confirmed to be Hep A, but they're still recommending people go there. Thankfully, it also looks like it is not one of the really, bad hepatitises. It very rarely has lasting effects, and typically only has lasting effects if you already have liver damage. If you are healthy, if you have a fairly intact liver, then people have a fever, some jaundice, this and that, and then they're better in a couple days to a week or so.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be short term, but they're mostly just trying to figure out what's happening and why all of a sudden this surge in cases. There's some sort of figure about like how it's based. 40 times the cases, which apparently they're doing.
Do you know when this started?
It looks like it started early in March. That was essentially the first it had been kind of mentioned, if that makes sense.
But it's reached ahead, it seems.
Pretty much, yeah. And then moving slightly to Rome, just for other news, it's bombing news, but like that's a really scary way to put it. I only want to mention this because 2 separate explosions happened in Rome recently, and this is after, I believe, early March. I know that Rome went on a bit of a lockdown, not a lockdown, but a kind of high alert after the United States first bombed Iran. Then I think, and I don't know if it was due to a threat or just due to simply like war footing, but I know that the entirety of Rome sort of went on this like crazy lockdown. There were bomb threats called into a bunch of places.
Really?
And again, I don't know if that was just sort of people pranking or because none of them turned out to be real.
Okay.
So it just was a thing where for a moment Rome was a little like, uh-oh, what is going on?
Yeah, understandable.
And then it has now faded somewhat. That's why not one of my major headlines is not the fact that Rome is still under some crazy high alert. You will probably, though, expect to see more of the
military presence?
around some of the sites. I imagine because that seems to be what they typically do is just deploy more people around the Colosseum, that type of thing, to make sure it's safe. But there were two explosions. One was inside the Park of the Aqueducts in Rome. There's an abandoned farmhouse. It looked like there was an explosion, and because this farmhouse is known to be where people who are experiencing
unhoused,
yeah, they sleep there in the farmhouse. So it was first thought to be that they were cooking with a propane tank, and something happened, and the propane tank blew up. Then later, a day later, they identified the bodies, and they both belong. I mean, the bodies are, as the bodies don't belong to people, but they are were identified as two anarchists who it looks like were creating a bomb before the bomb blew up and killing them both.
And they were the only two people killed or injured, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And only two people around, it looks like.
Okay.
And that was, I only mentioned that as a specifically anarchists because in the north, in Milan, around Cortina and Milan, a lot of these anarchists were attacking the railways, basically damaging
during the Olympics.
During the Olympics, right? Yeah, sort of trying to make a momentum, make a voice. It's not related at all, but I do believe it was also anarchists in Berlin. I don't know if you remember, they set off a bomb in the Berlin power plant, and it was supposed to, they were trying to target the generator or whatever it is for specifically the wealthier part of Berlin,
right?
And I guess they didn't realize it also ran through a very much not wealthy part of Berlin,
right?
So I think it was a fairly poor neighborhood as well as a fairly wealthy neighborhood lost power for a good while.
It was a long time, yeah.
A good couple weeks it looked like. So, and I assume it's now sort of repaired, but it just seems sort of this rise in anarchism, which is a very 1900s statement.
These people who were creating bombs and the ones that were placed on the railway in Milan, just a quick thing, other thought, the ones that were placed on railways in Milan didn't injure any person.
I don't believe so, no.
Right, okay. Does anybody know what these anarchists want? Just anarchy?
I think so. I'm honestly not sure.
No one knows their motive necessarily?
Well, it seems like also when it does injure people, they apologize.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem like any of them are trying to hurt people. So even with this bomb, it doesn't seem... There's also a guy in prison currently, an anarchist in prison. The only one actually in Italy held under, it's called 41 bis, B-I-S, and it's essentially a law designed to hold mafia bosses or terrorists or people who are trying to communicate with the outside world in order to still run their operations. So he's the only anarchist held in this under these circumstances, but they think it was either in solidarity with him or at his urging or something like that. But again, there's no at least they have not released whether there's a target in mind or whether this was just I think in the past this guy in prison was accused of bombing Carabinieri barracks in Fusano, I believe, but no one was hurt. So, and it looks like again the intent.
And that was done while he was in jail, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
but at his behest, it seems, allegedly.
It seems.
Okay.
That is, yeah. Actually, interestingly, last year that was overturned. It went from a life sentence into a 26-year sentence because it wasn't entirely sure what the connection was to him, whether it was at his command or is it, heavily hinting at it or et cetera, et cetera. But he's still in prison for other things. So that all being said, I didn't want anyone seeing that and be like, wait, what is going on? Because at the same day later in Piano del Sole, which is a kind of neighborhood area to the west of Rome, there was an explosion that leveled a 3-story residential complex, 3-story residential building. Everyone's mostly okay. Two people were taken to the hospital. They were found under the rubble and taken to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
It was a couple who were at home. Everybody else was gone for the day. It looks like because it was during the middle of the day.
Weirdly fortunate for all those other people.
Yeah, and this has to do with, going back to LPG, liquid petroleum gas, this has to do with a faulty liquid petroleum gas canister in the basement, apparently, that somehow ignited. And I'm honestly not sure how it ignited, but I know that in cars that are converted or sold as LPG cars, they are under much more pressure than a gas tank is. Okay. So I don't know if something happened with the pressurization. They are still investigating it, obviously, but it was one of those things where if I were going to go somewhere and I keep seeing explosion in Rome, I'd think maybe I shouldn't go to
Right.
Rome.
That's
So
very scary sounding.
yeah, I just wanted to add those all into this lovely episode and make sure y'all know that that is not like some coordinated attack
Right.
necessarily or anything to do with United States and Iran.
Yes. Good
So
point.
that was all of my headlines.
Okay, and I think I just have one, which a lot of people in the US and probably North America in general are aware of at this point. So, as of Monday, and this is not affecting people flying into Italy from outside of the US, this is just, I wanted to make this note because I think a lot of our listeners are from the US and or maybe are flying through the US to make connections, things like that. So as of Monday, ICE agents will be in many different airports across the United States. Unclear so far as to their purpose there
Or their role in
or
it.
their role or what they're supposed to be doing. Lightheartedly, there are videos of regular people are taking videos of these ICE agents just standing around. I believe on Sunday night, I think it was, a woman and her daughter were taken by ICE. That was kind of before the rollout even happened in airports. Videos of that looked very scary. So this is just to let everybody know there's an ICE presence in airports across the U.S. I'm assuming it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I just wanted to let everybody know that's happening.
And it's all, I think, just on a totally on a practical level. They aren't, as you mentioned, their role there is unclear. So it is unlikely to help alleviate the long lines. I know some airports have had really long lines. I think Savannah is actually very lucky because it's had almost no line. It's so nice being at a small airport. But so if you happen to go through like a regional security in JFK, Atlanta, Detroit, any major airport that will then go on to Italy especially, you will probably have to plan on a couple of additional, like some people are saying literally plan on additional hours, not additional
I've heard
30 minutes.
4 hours it takes to get through TSA. And so TSA is they are really struggling right now. And TSA agents have not been paid a salary since February 14th. So at this moment, I feel that they really deserve a lot of empathy. The people who are still working are not being paid, and they are going through it with just as much as everybody else is, going through long lines at the airport, things like that. So today, when this episode comes out, Congress is supposed to be meeting for the last time before they take a 2-week vacation. They are discussing funding of DHS, which TSA falls under that umbrella. So that is why they are not getting paid their salaries right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think as I'm reading some article about how some are quitting, sort of like back when the air traffic controllers were also not being paid, and some were just like, I literally need money and I can't wait for this to be over. I know some TSA officers apparently, or agents, are also in that same boat of like, I think there's articles about some having cars repossessed or, missing rent payments, which is like also sort of harrowing to know how many people are 1 month away from losing housing and losing cars in the States.
Yeah.
Like also while on a federal salary or at least a steady paycheck, for lack of a better word. But this also means too, just that it is, as you mentioned with ICE rollout in these different airports, it is not going to alleviate the problem.
Right.
At best, nothing will change. And at worst, it will get worse simply because it's just, you're now adding a lot more cooks to the kitchen who are, and as even Tom Homan, the border czar, keeps saying, are completely untrained in at least in TSA
job
anything.
things.
So they can't do passport checks. They can't do anything. They can't, so it's just, it's going to be, and I think he originally was saying, oh, they could check passports, but it's like, right. But not if you aren't taught in the signs of what a forged passport looks like, you probably can't. This is just something, if you are coming to Italy anytime in the next, this doesn't have an expiry date, I guess. So anytime soon, then to keep in mind that you might need to tack on a few extra hours, depending where you're flying from. Weirdly, I actually recommend checking out this subreddits for whatever city you're in, if there is one. This is obviously probably more in line for major cities, but even with something like Savannah, which is a smaller, mid-sized city, people will, I think, once a day ask about the lines at the airport before they go. A lot of tourists, especially, like, is this something we're spending all morning at the airport?
And also consider when you book a ticket, what airports you will be flying through, like connecting through in the U.S. Like I know Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson has ICE presence and long TSA lines, it seems. Obviously, like every New York airport is struggling with this.
Like
So
JFK, in the best of circumstances, is a 2-hour-long
an awful
TSA
place to
line.
be.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like this is going to make it much worse. And that's also especially important when you're going back just after a long flight, and just to know that you might miss a connecting flight if you have to be, not if you will have to go through security there. So you might be missing a flight or something like that. So just to potentially look for flights out of Italy that land, and this is even important, I think, going to, if you have a connecting flight to Canada. I'm not sure if they do. I know there's a lot of flights from States to like Montreal and over to Italy. I don't know how many go from like Italy to, somewhere in New York and then up to Canada. But that is also to keep in mind that you might have to pass through security, and just to kind of maybe don't have a 2-hour turnaround, but like a 4-hour turnaround, just to be safe. And on the note of Canada Air, we do want to express our genuine, deepest sympathies
Absolutely.
to the families and anyone affected by the 2 pilots who lost their lives on the Canada Air CRJ flight that landed in LaGuardia the other day. It is just, again, going back to that thing of air traffic controllers, this one person running ground and air. It just seemed like
It's way too much for one person. I mean, the air traffic controllers, I think, in the best of times in history, have had an incredibly difficult and straining job to do. But right now, it just seems really awful. So, absolutely, our sympathies go out to the 2 pilots who lost their lives, their families and friends, everybody who was on that flight and affected by that. The Port Authority officers, I think, is who was in the fire truck that was hit by the plane. Everyone involved in that. We're just
and honestly, I from spending time on the aviation subreddit on Reddit, it seems like the Canadian aviation family, for lack of a better word, is a very small one. There are not many. It's like everybody already knows each other, so it seems like this is it's massively affected a lot of people. So our hearts go out to them, to everyone, because that is just genuinely sad. I mean, there's like that. It's a horrible accident, and it is not a great note to end a podcast episode on, but it is something we wanted to mention.
But also, major thank you if you work for an airline, if
Yeah.
you work for anything ground crew, anything involved in airports and travel. And obviously air traffic control. If there's so many important jobs involved and so many people involved in all of that, and we're really grateful to you for doing your job.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for listening. We do appreciate you listening and spending time with us.
Yeah, this has been Only a Bag, newly to be the Italy Travel Podcast. Tanti abbracci.